Hey everyone, my name's PK. Here I have Jenny Mo, who I'm really grateful to have on this episode. She's not a person trying to sell you anything. In fact, I posted on my Facebook group, I said, is anyone here like a real, just human, real life property investor who can share their journey, warts and all, like all the failures, successes, challenges, hardships, success, etc., for the benefit or betterment of the wider community? I think we don't really get to hear so many just grassroots, on the ground stories from real people who are just not selling anything. So have no agenda, have no bias, have no like anything motivated to tell you. And so I think that's kind of rare. So Jenny, she's a shift worker in logistics. I think she's got a fifth property now. She started in around 2017. We might talk about in terms of like how to be a property investor, being like a single mom and really hustling and kind of managing everything. She's done some developments. She's got an incredible story, which I'm actually quite keen to hear as well. But I'll let her talk about it. Thank you, Jenny, so much for making time.
Oh, thank you, PK. Thank you for having me on. I do thoroughly enjoy sharing with people. I think we share a similar purpose in that sense, in that I love to share and hopefully inspire, whether it be people similar to myself, solo parents, or yeah, just people that, especially if they feel like they're down and out, and
Hmm.
that moment when you want to give up. So I think we're similar in that sense. So
Right.
thank you very much for having me on.
No, I'm very grateful. I mean, the idea is to inspire and educate, and also to give people a realization of what it really takes to be a kind of long-term property investor. Welcome to the Oz Property Investment Mastery Podcast. My name's PK, and I help busy people build passive income by buying top 5% growth and cash flow property and build a portfolio using data without wasting months doing research, spending weekends at inspection or catching flights, or dropping $10,000 to $20,000 on buyer's agents every single time. So if you're confused, lack confidence, and just overwhelmed with all the information and marketing misinformation available online and don't know where to start, then this show is for you. Should we just go straight? I mean, we'll start from the start at some point, but let's just pick on what you just said, because I think that's very interesting. When people are down and out, like, when have you been down and out, and how did that feel? And then how did you come out of that from a property perspective or a mindset perspective?
I think the hardest part was when my daughter's dad and I separated when she was 18 months old. So I think that was probably, it was a really tough time. I don't know, you're a parent, you probably understand, but an 18-month-old child, just only recently gone back to full-time work from my maternity leave, adjusting to that, being away from my child for 12 and a
Hmm.
half hours at a time,
Hmm.
overnight, being shift worker, those sorts of things. So I think that was a hard adjustment. Like, how am I going to do this all on my own?
Hmm.
Um, and also the properties, because we'd bought 4 in the 15 months leading up to when she was born,
Right.
and very highly leveraged. So I didn't plan, I didn't go into it thinking, oh, well, maybe 2 years I might have to sell or refinance or anything like that. It was a kind of like it was a long-term plan. And then all of a sudden it was a less than a 3-year plan. It kind of changed and I had no control and no say in it, I guess.
Hmm. I think what's quite I mean, I think people can relate to maybe not exactly that specific kind of situation, but I think so many of us, including me, we can relate to like feeling like there's a lot of burden on our shoulders that we can't control. And like, when there's one burden, like you lose your job, it's like that sucks, but you can kind of deal with it. When there's two burdens and or three or four, like, when you're a parent, it's a burden of love. You always think about your kids. You want to spend time, as much of it as possible, with them. But then if you get a curveball and then something just shatters that, like, it's kind of debilitating in a lot of ways. How did you deal with that? Because I mean, we'll get to property and everything like that, but I want people to realize that property is as much a mindset game as it is a finance or suburb selection, property selection game. So how did you cope with that? And what were the stories that you told yourself either to come out of that, or what were the stories that perhaps you were telling yourself that were further entrenching you in that?
Yeah. It's funny because we can say it's not related to property, but I think property actually got me through it, right?
Right.
So, some people don't like distractions, but when something so big happens in our life, our focus can be solely on the problem, right? Because it's so intense. And I think property actually gave me something that I could control, something that I could try and be good at, I could learn more about, I could throw myself into. Um, and the loneliness as well, right? Because I went from having a household with a family
Mm,
to having, a lot of time on my own. And there's friends and there's dinners and things like that, but there's still going to be that hour before bed, or there's still going to be those times. And I actually think that it was property that was a welcomed distraction, and something that I could really throw myself into.
right.
Um, I'm not a psychologist, so I'm not telling everyone to work problems. But at the end of the day, I was working through them. Like I think I kind of compartmentalized it, to be honest, because I had my psychologist,
Mhm.
and I had my meditation, and I had journals, and I had ways of expressing myself and friends and family. But I think property was the one part that actually lifted me. And I think when we can't control a situation, we make I think I just made a choice whether I wanted to live in that space, or whether I was like, it's just eventually life's got to go on, and
Mm.
it's a choice. And that's a lot of meditation.
Was it like something about real estate or property specifically that you became really passionate about, and it was your kind of boat to the other side of the river, so to speak? Or could it have been anything? It just so happened to be that you were thinking about property and acting upon property.
Well, I think so. Mindfulness is something, right? So let's just say I took up a different hobby, right? Let's just
Yep.
say I took up knitting or something that was relaxing or something like that. I've got ADHD, so my mind will still tick. When my mind is really focused on something it's so complex. Property investing isn't easy. It's got the taxation, it's got the like it is yeah, I've worked in a lot of industries, and this is a very complex industry as an investor to know the whole picture, right? And so I think it actually gave me, a space that I could learn and feel good about that, if that makes sense. And it utilized my brain. So I didn't have space to think about it in those moments, right? If I'm
Right.
studying tax law or something else, I'm I don't have I'm not thinking about all the other problems in the world. So it's a hobby for me, but I don't. That's the only thing I've got. I don't know, PK. You're the first person to ask me that question. I haven't had to think about that yet.
I asked you that question because I can genuinely, I'm not just saying that, I can genuinely I don't know if I got ADHD or not, but my mind is always ticking. Like you kind of suggested for yourself. I'm one of these people, like here on the other side of my pool, I've got these like deck chairs, and if I lay on them after literally 2 minutes, I'm like, what am I doing? Like feels so unproductive. I need to put on a podcast or something like that. It's kind of a blessing and a curse at the same time. So that's kind of why I was asking. Was it but property for me as well is so juicy because there's so many angles. And I think why you and maybe myself and so many others love property is that yes, it's complex, yes, it's hard, so to speak, but it's also conquerable. I don't know if you
Yes.
get that sense, like
Yes.
once you do dive into the world that is Australian real estate, you can conquer it. Is that
Yeah.
a fair statement, or what do you think about that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I that's part of it. So maybe I'm a control freak, but I think that's part of it, right? So it's something that I can become good at and I can be strategic with. So I agree. It does actually, like, it just is possible to conquer, right? It doesn't matter who you are, or how much you know, or how little you know, or who your contacts are. I don't have any family, so like I've said it a few times before, but like my dad shook his head. I can still remember that look when I told him I bought my fourth property. that I mean, it's not that he was disappointed in me, it's more so that he's very conservative, right?
Right.
So, like, I guess it gives me a space to just aim towards big things because they're achievable, PK. I agree. I agree.
And then like I mean you've taken it to the next level where I presume this is after your separation, like you got so into it that you started, correct me if I'm wrong, you started doing developments or on the lending side. Like for me, when I take up a new thing and I deep dive into it, I clear my plate. I'm like, okay, I've organized this part of my life to be like low stress. I've organized that other part of my life to be kind of on hold, and I'm just going to go really into this, whatever it is, development. For you, it seems you don't have that luxury because being a single mom is obviously like the hardest thing in the world. I
I
could
was
not.
just thinking, oh my God, that sounds amazing. I would be so good at property if I had that option.
Right,
So
right.
I still have to take out garbage bins. I have to still do washing. I think it was, and I'm still working full time as well. So
So
like,
how
it's
like
not.
how can I just interject and say, like, just tell me how you did that? Because property development is not for the faint-hearted. Like, how did you manage that?
There was a lot of late nights. There was a lot of nights. I remember one night in particular, because I worked 12 and a half hour shifts. And it's not like this all the time, okay? So, like, people don't go, oh, I can't do that. It is just peaks and troughs, right?
Hmm.
But I was trying to settle the loan for my first development purchase. And we had a lot of issues. I was paying something like $400 a day in late fees that we
Oh.
weren't settling on it. Um, it was very complex. My first purchase in a trust, um, and there was a lot of complexities with the loan paperwork. Having to The broker didn't realise initially that we had to get a solicitor to sign off on it.
Hmm.
You're probably familiar with that, but
In a
the
trust, yeah, for
guarantor and
sure.
those sorts of things. So he missed that. So it was like we were constantly applying, like sending the final paperwork off, and it just never ended. And I can remember one night I hit a reset button because was it was just all over the place. And sometimes you do have to make those sacrifices. I'm not saying everyone should do this, um, but I remember coming home and I'd worked three 12.5 hour shifts in a row. So I get up at 4:30 in the morning, I get home at 6 at night. I'm still taking my garbage bins out. I'm still making my dinner. I'm still washing my clothes.
Feeding the kids and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, well, my daughter would have been at her dad's when I was on those shifts, but
Okay.
nonetheless.
Yeah.
Um, and I remember like staying up until, I think I had to get up at 4:30 again the next morning. I think it was about 1 in the morning, and I got home and I didn't eat. I didn't do anything. I just said to myself, I have to get my head around this because I'd lost confidence in the professional at the time, because a few things had been missed. And it was kind of like that. I had a fork in the road basically, where I can't keep just trusting and waiting for other people to give me the right information. I just
Mhm.
had to get my head around it. So, this thick of paperwork with all trust deeds that are stamped and all the things and certified, I had to, yeah. And I sat there and went through the checklists. I photocopied bits of paper, I highlighted stuff, and I just worked through every document. And some documents don't even relate. So it says in the checklist it's XYZ, and the actual document doesn't say it's XYZ. So, like, process of elimination. And if that gives you an idea of a
Yeah.
12.5 hour shift from 4:30 in the morning until, whatever it was, midnight, whatever it was in the end. But that's just once. It's one day out of your life. But if I didn't do that, it was just spiraling. Does that make sense? I
Yeah,
probably,
it
I
does.
don't,
It does. I think those things don't happen every day, but I think you still need to have the mental fortitude and stability and resilience to meet them, to meet those days, to meet those challenges as and when they occur. Now, I don't want to freak people out. Like that does not happen in standard
no,
property
and that's
investing.
probably one of the worst.
Yeah. Like that's kind of an exception rather than the rule. But I'm just trying to relate this, and so people get value. There are so many people out there who, let's say, work hard jobs. You know, they're husband, wife, or whatever. They're both working. They've got a couple of kids, and they're like, okay, like I understand that I don't want to rely on the pension when I retire. I understand that I need to transfer or transform my active income into passive income. I get all these things, but I just don't have the time. I just don't have the intelligence. I don't have the knowledge to do anything about it. And because they don't have the time or the knowledge, they don't do anything because they're so scared. That's like, it's not even analysis by paralysis. It's like, I don't even have done the analysis. I'm just paralyzed to take action because what if something goes wrong? And I mean, you experience like the ultimate what if something goes wrong with your separation. I don't know how it works with the assets being split or anything like that. But just for those people, can you give us some advice on like just how to take action, how to just begin, how to take the first step, more from a mindset or mentality perspective? I think that's where people fall over. They just don't do anything.
Yeah, it can, and yeah, a lot of people, I mean, throw their hands up. I threw my hands up, so I wanted to buy my first property when I was 17. I didn't buy my first property until I was 35. Like, I'm not even talking like a family home. I mean, like my first purchase to sign like a contract of sale. So I get it, is what I'm saying,
Mhm.
if that makes sense. I We didn't have forums, we didn't have podcasts. I was reading the Domain out of the back of the newspaper every week for 18 years or 17 years, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So I've been there, is what I'm saying. And I think maybe the biggest part of that is it's never too late as well. So, for those that perhaps have thought they've missed some boat, or I don't have enough education, I didn't know what I was doing throughout those 17 or 18 years, but I learned. You can always learn anything. We can learn anything. And it's, if you've got a thirst for knowledge and you've got a desire, I think is really important too. So I think identifying what's what you want, I think, is part of it, right? Because if you hopped in a car in this day and age and you've got your Apple Play maps and everything up there and you just drive, you could drive forever. You could go any direction, which is I liken to strategy. But if there's no destination, where are you going, and how will you know when you get there? How do you find the best route for you to get there? And it might seem like a silly analogy, but it's one I use. So I think if people can spend the time to sit down and work out what's important to them, what they want their desired future state to be like. If people can do that and get really clear on it, like it took me a year and a half recently to get clear on accepting I'm going to stay in this house forever and not the big dream home that I wanted. Right? It took me a year and a half. There's a lot of time. Um, but I sat with myself. I didn't push myself to make any decisions. I just worked through the emotions involved, and through meditation and things like that, and taking that time to get that point, then it's just everything goes, because you know where you're going, your motivation's there, your why, your reasons is there. And any times that are tough and low, you draw on those.
Right, right. I think one thing that people struggle with, including myself, is like how to just sit with yourself and ask yourself what your goal is or what your why is. It's very, I find it tough, and I've been meditating for a long time. I still find it tough for like just blocking out all the noise, all the devices, and just like sitting alone and for like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or whatever it is, and just self-reflecting. It's very confronting sometimes. Um, how did you do it? Like, can you give some tips in terms of like, I don't mean to say like, oh, breathe like this or breathe like that, but like how do you sit and meditate and actually understand what your burning desire in life is? Like, how do we actually create that why from a practical perspective?
I I have a little bit of an advantage because I've done a postgrad in change management,
There
so
you
I've got a bit of an
go.
advantage for that. That, but nonetheless, there's a lot of basics. But the guided meditation, is where I started. Um, and there are lots of short ones. And I think building up to it,
Mhm.
what meditation has taught me is to not judge myself in moments, especially, right? So one of the things that I learned when I first started to meditate was I'm not good at this. Oh my god, my thoughts are still going left, right, and center. My toes itchy, my back sore, or what's out of my ear. Like that's normal and that's okay. But it's like anything, right? We get better at it with time and practice. So if you dedicate, eh, like, just dedicate a habit. Dedicate 5 minutes a day. It doesn't have to be big. Um, to meditation, guided. I do recommend, unless they've got a professional, because it teaches you your breathing. So, holding your breath at the top, you would know all of these things. So holding your breath at the top, kind of, what is the, can't even remember the actual specifics, but basically it calms the body through the
Yeah.
breathing. You breathe out longer than you breathe in, the standard speaker. I know you're nodding because you get
Yeah, I love this
it.
stuff, yeah. People are probably wondering, "Why are we talking about this on a property podcast?" But it's so important, and I should also say, Jenny, like, a bit like you came to that realization that, actually, do I need or do I want a dream home, or am I happy to live in here? Like, you might start meditating, right? I don't know if you experience this, Jenny, and you might be like, "Actually, I thought I wanted to become a property investor because of all those ads that I see, all these success stories, but actually it doesn't really vibe with me. Like, if I actually am in tune with myself, maybe passive income isn't for you. Maybe, like, financial abundance isn't your ultimate goal in life, and that's completely fine. It's about at least achieving that state of realization, or you might feel, or you might find that I do want that, and it's completely okay in the spirit of not judging. It's fine to want $1,000,000. It's fine to want 100K passive income. It's fine. It does not make you hedonistic. It does not make you a bad person, but at least come to that realization, and then you can do something about it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. That's how it all works for me. And I do a lot more work probably on you, probably your suburbs and your data, and I love data.
Mhm.
Um, but professionals like yourself and professionals, that's their job. I've got to work 40 odd hours a week elsewhere doing other things, right? So I tend to narrow in what I do based on that. So I have limited capacity, and it's always about maximizing my knowledge in line with my capacity. But what never wavers is always building on those, and they call them secondary skills, but they should be primary, but they're secondary skills, which is, one of my favorite articles is The Making of a Corporate Athlete. And it basically says, the healthy performance pyramid says that, exercise, diet, all of those things, meditation, all of those things enable you to perform at a level, that you might not be able to without them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. It's almost like I want my audience to give me permission to talk about these things more, and I'm very happy that you're bringing them up, because I couldn't relate more. Even if it seems trivial, it's like if you've gone for a run or you've done some exercise in the morning, and you're just living this all-rounded life, right? And then you get that call of doom from your property manager saying the hot water cylinder is broken down or whatever. It's like your ability to manage that emotionally, of course, financially as well, is
Yeah.
so much healthier if you are a more all-rounded individual. And instead of thinking, "Oh, that's the third hot water cylinder in 3 properties that's gone bust in 3 years. Forget this property investing, and just to hell with it. It's not worth it." You're still able to see the forest and the trees. You're like, "Okay, yeah, that's not ideal, but I have a goal that I'm working towards." It's just being able to have that context at all times. It's about being able to, be in this world, but not of this world, so to speak. It's just being able to see things and have a relationship with your mind, as
Yeah.
opposed to being with your mind. You're not your
Yeah.
mind. You have a relationship with your mind. That's one thing that I always try to tell myself when something like this happens. Easier said than done. But yeah, that's why we should do that. What was it? This was it pyramid? What did you call that?
Oh, the making of a corporate athlete.
Yeah, and there was
Um,
that pyramid that you were talking about, or
Yes, it's the healthy performance pyramid. So it's basically a sports psychologist,
uh-huh.
Jim Loher. And yeah, you'll find it on Harvard Business website, the article. So, and I think anyone I think you can get free access up to 5 a month articles or something like that. So I highly recommend people look it up. It's been very powerful for me to remind me that these are the things, even when it seems like you don't have time. They're the times that you need to do it more, because it actually gives you can do better work in shorter time and more focused. You actually perform better by sacking that half an hour, not sacking, but by utilizing half an hour rather than the actual issue and problem at hand.
Hmm.
By saying, I'm going to walk away, I need to get out, I'm going to go to the beach, I'm going to go for a walk along the beach, or I'm going to go to the gym and just tune out for a bit and come back, and you can get a lot of that work done. Whereas you might be sitting there for the next 3 days trying to solve that problem or deal with that issue, like you're saying with the hot water system. So
Yeah. That's fair. That's fair enough. And how's your strategy changed? Like, since 2017 when you started the property journey, has because everyone always says start with strategy, as if mythically our strategy in 5 or 10 or 15 years will be the exact same as when we first started. How's yours shifted, and like, why has it
absolutely.
shifted?
So I'm all about agile change management.
Right.
So I'm very much so about remaining agile, because I think when we box us, we draw a path, and that's the only path we see. When things come at us, we can't pivot, right? And you can't control everything. So you've got, like, my personal circumstances for me, but then you've also got external interest rates are rising. There's things you can't control,
Yeah.
and we can live in a place that, oh, it's not fair. It's or we just we focus on being agile and being able to ensure that we're moving around. And so when we bought the 4 properties, they were worth 1.92 mil in total, and at 5% on that is $100,000.
Yeah.
We then basically, I had a plan on to pay them down in 15 years. I was paying principal and interest on them. That was it. And then it's just passive income. I'm not saying it's the best strategy, right? It's a lazy strategy. But what that meant was that if I had that there, I still had opportunity to do other things, right? That was the worst case scenario. So if you can find a strategy that's a worst case scenario, you can always improve on it, right? You just need to keep an eye out for opportunities. Basically, with the 15 years to pay it down, I was 35 when I bought it, would have been 50, 50, 100K. It's simple. It didn't, so you can see now, it also didn't rely on any growth.
Mm.
My base strategy didn't rely on growth. I'm not saying this is perfect. I'm just saying this is what I did, because I knew worst case scenario, that's where I'd be. All I had to do every month was pay X amount off the mortgages. That's it. It was simple. Um, but of course, I lost half, not lost, I shouldn't say lost, but we separated the assets. Um, and we borrowed, two were 98% lent, one was 96, and the other one was 80. So they're highly leveraged as well.
Yeah.
And not the growth we've seen the last 2 years either at the time. So it was a bit scary in that sense. I, I couldn't keep all four. My daughter's dad said to me, "It's your empire," but I had to buy him out, and I didn't have any money, if that makes sense. But I traded cash for assets, and I negotiated 5,000 emergency money, and he got the cash, I got the assets, because I knew if that makes sense. As long as I can put food on the table, those assets, it's compounding, right? So it was better that I took higher valued properties than it was the cash side of it. So that was a, maybe a risk that I took, but that's how it works, PK, right?
Yeah, no risk, no gain. No risk, no gain. So how many of them do you still have?
So I kept two post settlement, post separation. Title transferred all of them. It was a little bit. It was all through COVID. It was very. It was really. It was quite complex because you could get stamp duty exemptions, and it was very complex. Trust me. And when I before just before I refinanced, I sat with my broker and said I want to. I don't want to keep. I want to maximize this, right? I want this done, but I want to get the best out of it. And so she sourced for me different valuations to ensure, like, to see if I could release some equity. So I maxed everything at that point in time. Interest rates were low, if that makes sense. It was right
Mhm.
on that, 2 point. I think one of mine was fixed at 2.49. One of my investments interest only, so that helped with my servicing, right? And I released cash during that. I didn't know what I was going to do with it because I'd maxed my servicing, right? And there's potentially other things that I've learned since then that I could have done. But at that point, I only had the knowledge that I had at the time. And so that was when I became a private lender. So I released that money thinking, what's the worst thing that can happen, right? I put it in the offset. Like, there's no loss from this. I could pay it off the loan tomorrow if I needed to for whatever reason. But I wanted to take advantage of that point in time because it might not be there again, and it's not now. So I can't even refinance what I have now, right? Because of the rate rises. So it's just seeing an opportunity, seeing that I was transferring the titles, I was refinancing the loans. Let's just do it all. And then 2 weeks later, I became a private lender, so for a development. So I didn't know when I released it that's what I was going to do, but I just knew that I'd know what to do with it when the opportunity came up.
And that's such a large, at least in my mind and the way that I think, that's such a dramatic shift in strategy from like just paying your houses off, which is, like you said, like boring but safe and that's fine, to being a private lender, which is probably on the other side of the spectrum. Like and let me know if this is what it is, right? You're
Yeah.
you're lending money in like a joint venture or a commercial loan type
Yes.
arrangement to a developer to do a development deal, and that development deal may or may not be profitable. You may or may not get your principal back, what to speak of any interest or profit share on top. Why, sorry if this is a little bit of a personal question, but why
That's
did you pivot so much? Like, why did you go, or in your mind, was it not risky because you actually had done so much due diligence on the project and the developer?
I saw I saw that I couldn't keep the same strategy. I didn't have the income, so my household income had halved. So I didn't have the income that we're paying the principal and interest. I didn't have the servicing to leverage. I had lost $1 million worth of property and assets. So, but I didn't want to lose the goal.
Yeah.
See? So that's, like I said before, I had a goal, right? Otherwise, I might have made different decisions. But I then thought, well, how else can I still achieve 100,000 passive income with no mortgage on my home by the time I'm 50? I'm 41 now, like it's getting there.
Sure.
Like it's getting close. Well, I would have been 40 at the time. So it's getting close. It's not like I've got 30 years for this to happen. And I might not get there, but I'm going to give it my best shot, right? Because even if I fall short, even if it's 52, or even if it's working part time instead of full time, or I've still got $100,000 on my mortgage on my house, it's better than nothing, right? And it is achievable, and I have a strategy to achieve it. It's mapped out,
I love
and
that.
I'm on the way to doing that. And it means I break things down into checkpoints. So otherwise it's overwhelming, right? How and the strategy can be so overwhelming. So I basically want to make $600,000 on top of my income in 5 years.
Amazing. Amazing. For me, the biggest thing like was that statement that you said, like, but I gave it my best shot. Like, even if you don't get to like an explicit goal by the time you're 50 years old, you've given it your best shot. And I think there's a sense of respect, self-respect and dignity and pride in actually taking action. Like you said, breaking it down and being practical about it, but taking action and doing something. There's, I think my grandfather or something used to say that, you know, what was that quote? He's like, tell people that you're trying to shoot for the rhinoceros. Because even if you don't get the rhinoceros, no one's going to blame you because it's like really hard to kind of not the best quote in this day and age, but you know what I mean? It's like go
Yeah,
for such a big goal that if you get it, that's great. But even if you don't, you're still going to achieve something massive
I
compared
just
to if
got
you hadn't
goosebumps.
gone for it. Yeah. So
I
it's
just
like
got goosebumps.
I love it. I love it. And I think like this is like we didn't really go into like tactics and like where to buy and what to buy and etc. But I think this type of conversation is actually something that will provide more fuel to people's financial independence than if we had spent half an hour talking about what is the boom suburb or should I buy in a trust or a company or personal names and all that kind of thing. I don't think this sort of conversation happens enough. And I think I'm just conscious of time. Last question I'll ask you, Jenny, is if you, I mean, there's no such thing as regret because everything is a learning experience. But for all the women out there that can relate to you or may relate to you in the future, what's one piece of advice? Let's say there's a 20-something year old, a female who's just graduated university and she watches this interview and she's like, I want to become like Jenny, like for the next 10, 20 years. Or maybe there's like a 55-year-old woman that's thinking, oh, look, I would have loved to do what Jenny has done, but I'm too old now. Like, what kind of advice can you give to women to kind of impart upon them your knowledge?
I was on a cruise last weekend, and an elderly couple randomly said, "Hi, how are you? Where are you from?" Newcastle. And the elderly couple said, "You don't know anything about property down there, do you?" What are the chances? Anyway, turns out he's actually a developer and owns a business brokerage. Irrelevant, however. It's funny because he would have been in his 80s, and he said to me, he touched me on the hand and he said to me, "You know what? Women are so much better at property than what men are." So I'm not doing the man female thing, but if you can see, there are advantages. If you see them as disadvantages, there's advantages. People are not as people want to help us more. People are more inclined to have conversations. We're not as intimidating, if that makes sense. There are so many benefits, I guess, being a woman in this industry, but it's all about perspective. So
Yeah.
seeing what those benefits are, I guess, and we can do anything. Honestly, every single person can do anything they want to do. We're our own worst enemies in the limitations that we put on ourselves. And I hope that people can see that. I mean, I'm doing a development that, like, I'm moving a house. I'm subdividing a property. I'm moving a house to the rear and putting it on an angle because I've got 3 easements on there and a
When you
sewer
put it
main to
like
the
that,
middle.
it's like I'm moving like this big, 4-ton house. Like that's a big deal.
But I'm moving a house to a rear and building a project built duplex at the front, subdividing and stratified 3. Do I know what I'm doing? No. I'm just doing it. I'm doing it as I go. I'm learning as I go. I'm calling on resources. I'm, asking, like, working with people. And I think that's the big part of it. Don't be so daunted because it's not a bad thing when you don't know much because people want to help. People aren't as inclined to help the know-it-alls, if that makes sense, right? So, it's that concept of humble inquiry. And I think if we believe that I had a boss years ago, and he said, you just need to be smart enough and you can learn anything. What smart enough means, I don't know. It wasn't my quote. Um, but the concept that you can learn anything, that's all it is. Figure
Yeah.
out draw up a plan. I'm going to sit with 5 brokers this over the next week, one every week. I'm going to make an appointment with 5 local brokers and just ask them what their thoughts are on XYZ. Or, I sat with so many brokers before I bought my first. I was
Mm.
door knocking everybody, but I was learning along the way.
Yeah,
And I found people that took me under their wing and genuinely wanted to help me. And I since have a fantastic professional team.
yeah,
So be someone that people want to work for, people, and someone that people enjoy working with. Have an energy, give back, excite people. If you can take people on your journey, if you can be excited about something, people generally want to come on board. People
yeah,
like that.
yeah, they
So
do.
I don't know. I don't know how to get that passion because I swear I was just born with the property passion. But
No, I can say it's definitely contagious, and if you're smart enough, you can learn anything. Or yeah, I think smartness in that context perhaps is just humility, as you referred to as well. If you're humble, you can learn anything because you're never going to be the smartest person in a particular topic anyway. So you might as well be humble and go to all the smartest people around you, learn off them, and then achieve your goals. Like I think that's a pretty clever way to go about it. So I love that you've shared that, Jenny. And I think your story, I mean, we didn't really do it justice. I could talk for a long time about it and your whole journey. Maybe we will in a future time, but I think it will serve to inspire and educate both men and women, but hopefully especially women to see, to change the stories that they tell themselves. We all tell ourselves stories from the morning we wake up in the morning, but I don't know if this is a fair statement, but I think some people tell themselves more negative stories than positive stories. And just by replacing the quality of content that we consume from our own mouth, from our own minds,
yes.
through stories like yourself, we can kind of replace them with more positivity. I know it sounds a bit woohoo and all that kind of thing, but it's honestly a dead set fact. you know?
Absolutely, because that negativity is not going to inspire anyone to do big and take risks and do more. Because if you tell yourself you can't, then you can't. So
Yeah.
it's just replace those stories. PK agree, and I even so much so lately replaced um, telling myself you've got this in those hard times. You've got this to I've got this. Even just that
Mm,
one word, right?
yeah.
It sounds silly, like you're saying. It sounds woohoo. But even that has been very powerful for me. So it's the small things, replace them, find a new sentence, write down all the bad ones and replace them, find something that replaces it, and just consciously make that decision. I agree.
Yeah. Changing your internal vocabulary, it's so powerful. Anyway, we can talk about that for ages, but I should wrap it up and honor your time. So thank you so much, Jenny. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I know you're very active on multiple Facebook groups and you're one of these people who always give back and is trying to help everyone out. But when I do share this episode on my podcast and YouTube and Facebook group, Australian Property Mastery with PK, I will tag Jenny, and people can comment and ask questions or DM you. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Just keep it professional, but yes, of
Yeah,
course.
yeah, of course, of course. And I should also say, Jenny is not a client of mine. I have no professional relationship with her. She's just a really nice human being that's just offered to do this session for the betterment of everyone. So on behalf of everyone, thank you so much, Jenny.
Thank you, PK. I appreciate all that you do for the community.
Thanks so much. All right, guys. Well, hopefully that brought you a ton of value. If it did, let me know on whatever platform you want, and I can do more and more of these sessions. Once again, my name's CK, and thanks again, Jenny.
Thanks, PK. Thanks, guys.